Good morning, class. My best ideas tend to come to me in dreams, and by dreams, I mean periods of my life where lucidity is optional. Coming up with an idea, like a good idea, is like remembering a piece of myself that I never knew was there. This process is vague, makes no sense, and tends to be incredibly frustrating when I can feel the memory brimming towards the surface, but God has not yet ordained that I remember it. That's rude. God exists because of me. I am God. I just haven't reached my full potential yet. I stumbled across this funny little YouTube channel of this kind-looking Australian man who had he made this stupid game about cutting fruit or whatever, and then this based game about a random hunk murdering scientists for sport and profit. And on his channel, he has this entire devlog series about another game he made called Feed the Deep. And in it, he constantly refers to assets and designs made for the game as art. This piqued my Aquarius sensibilities, and the intense amount of philosophy surrounding art and God that I've been ingesting recently. And I went, what do you call it that? I don't know if this singular asset in a game qualifies as a cohesive art object, but if you take the singular asset as a piece of the larger whole, then yes, it is 100% art. And does it even matter if this singular asset is referred to as art? Because what is and isn't art, more specifically art objects, is deeply subjective. And in the video, he's more using easily relatable words and concepts to get across what the subject of a sentence is without having to explain game dev terminology. And I'm sure that in some way that random silt texture does say something about the ecosphere the piece was created in. And I bet it does make remark to the diesel punk fascist capitalist hellscape we're living in, and now my fucking brain hurts. There's no way that this random asset from an indie game that categorically can be considered an art object is political, right? How can one claim that all art is political when you can look at this, understand it to be an art object that was made with intent for a specific purpose and is attempting to relay that purpose onto the viewer, and then still claim that all art is political? Definitions, logistics, semantics. I am a bleeding heart pedant with a penchant for poor decision making and great theories, thoughts, and ideas. This, you attractive little thinker, you. Look at you choosing to use your critical thinking skills and the way your brain evolved them to be used. I'm so proud of you. This is exactly what I want to uncover today. How can you consider all art to be political? Part 1. Art that is 100% political. Animal Farm sure as fuck exists, and while not being the best of Orwell's work, it sure as fuck does exist. And in this 1945 novel, George Orwell tells the story of a bunch of cute little farm critters, not happy with the oppressive overlord being the farmer, have a socialist uprising, and then one charismatic little shit of a pig named Napoleon abuses the socio-political state of the farm to do a fascism. Whoops. This is an expressly political piece of art. It has a very clear agenda and a message that it is trying to relay to the reader. In this section, I want to examine philosophies surrounding art and specific pieces of art that are expressly political in an attempt to find their meaning and assess their value. Specifically, I would like to do this so we have a very clear picture of what expressly political art is, looks like, and the ways that it signals to the observer that it is political. I've been reading this book, Brecht on Theater, the Development of an Aesthetic, written largely by Bertolt Brecht, but edited and translated by John Willett. It's a fantastic book. You should read it if you're interested and stuff like this. But it is a collection of journals, essays, and interviews that the German playwright Bertolt Brecht did from the start of his career in Germany as a playwright in the 1920s all the way through to the latter stages of his career. It is meant to demonstrate how he develops his aesthetic and philosophical framework. In it, he places a very heavy importance on the type of theater seen in musicals like American Idiot on Broadway and Spring Awakening, and TV shows like Shameless and Euphoria. Although I'm sure that these specific examples are not wholly what Brecht is imagining. He describes the concept of the epic theater, a form of play that specifically rejects the idea of showing the audience something fantastical for the sake of fantasy and escapism, instead replacing this with theater that shows the truth, the correctness, as he puts it, of the state of the world, devoid of a value judgment on the state of the world. The purpose in this is for the audience to rely on their own emotions and opinions to assess the value of a play and come to a conclusion about how they feel about it. He believes that the value of the art object comes from this discussion. The value of the play comes from this discussion. At the time, and even to this day, honestly, this is a very radical way of looking at the theater. It is unapologetically political, which is not shocking considering the guy read Marx's theory on capital and then began developing this aesthetic framework. It is inherently political and very influential. He writes a lot about how the theater is resistant to change because of the way it is used as a form of escapism. Anything that would radically destroy the theater as it is and would turn it into something new would inevitably affect society as a whole. Brecht rejects the status quo and wishes to bring about a new age of theater, therefore a new age of the world. And we can see these ideas present in art nowadays as well, like the examples from earlier. TV, movie, and theatrical productions that place a heavy emphasis on the state of the world, depicting it in honest detail and not afraid to show the uglier parts of the world that we live in. Artists nowadays find a healthier medium between the hardcore adherence to the ideas of the epic theater and having an ethos that the audience is able to attach to and relate to for the purposes of telling their story. On the 20th of April, 2010, American Idiot the Musical premiered at St. James Theater on Broadway. In this musical, based on the concept album written by the pop-punk band Green Day, a particularly bleak view of life in America is demonstrated. The show itself is beautiful, if not purposefully ostentatious, and very aware of the way in which their main characters come off. The three main perspectives we are given throughout the show are Johnny, Will, and Tunny. At the start of the show, to put it lightly, they're jerk-offs. They're going nowhere. They kind of fucking suck, and they affect with this grandeur view of like woe is me nihilism, which is like at first like really difficult to latch onto, and it's like a really bold choice, but over the course of the show it kind of like develops and changes, and it makes more sense as you see it more and more and you get ingratiated into the world of American Idiot. During the song Jesus of Suburbia, we are given a glimpse into the way that these characters view themselves and the world around them. This is a largely nihilistic point of view, as I described. Each of them get their own lines that give different colorations of this nihilism. Tunny being fed up with commercialism and largely the idea of the American dream as it is sold in advertising and on TV. Will being fed up with people and the smattering of fake niceties present throughout life. And Johnny serving as a bridge between the pair and his perspective in this is all bullshit. We need to find meaning ourselves and separate from what the world tells us to be and what the world tells us to think. They go as far to say that none of this, the town, the culture, the society that they currently reside in, does not exist, and that something more real must be out there. In the documentary that Green Day made surrounding the production of the musical and its rise to being on Broadway, they try to claim that Boulevard of Broken Dreams is the I Want song of the musical, but that's bullshit. That's untrue. I don't like that. That's a bad assessment from the director himself, specifically because at the end of Jesus Suburbia, Johnny literally gathers gathers his two friends and say, we need to get the fuck out of here, before proclaiming the ideology he is going to take moving forward, literally saying, and I leave behind this hurricane of broken lives, which is the first proclamation of want in the show, the desire to leave their mess of a life behind in search of something meaningful. And in that, I believe that you can find the message of the show. The system, as it were, has sold a dream that is not tangible to the lower strata of the population. On the whole, the American government has created a land where few can thrive and even fewer can survive, a perspective that the authors, Billy Joe and company, hold true to this day, you know, in spite of the fact that they are among the few to survive and thrive, but the implications of that are better left for another video. The only way to find meaning under this system is to pave your own path and hunt for your own sense of meaning. It is a deeply counterculture message from a counterculture album that created a counterculture musical. Each of our characters also independently find their own meaning and subsequently have that meaning utterly fucking destroy them. Will's girlfriend gets pregnant and he now must figure out how to not only be a father but be a good partner, of which he does a terrible job at both. In this, he misses his friends and is romanticizing their lives, which only shines a light on the harder and more unsightly parts of his life as it came to be. Johnny finds his meaning in hedonism, a girlfriend and a drug dealer, giving him a seemingly infinite source of pleasure in a world so devoid of it, never stopping to realize how these new vices are destroying him and the people around him. And Tunney ultimately buys into the messaging of American patriotism, enlisting to go fight in Afghanistan in the hopes that this will bring him purpose, make him strong, turn him into the favorite son, which is one of the best songs in the show, by the way. Tunney then gets a leg blown off in Afghanistan and is promptly tossed aside by the government as if his contribution never mattered. And that's about where things end. There's a lot of like grandstanding and theatrics surrounding the events of the characters. They pull a couple of songs from the album to come out after American Idiot, 21st Century Breakdown, and I really like how they do that and like all of the various melodies and the way that they are able to arrange these two bodies of work into a cohesive, very like Greek tragedy-esque musical. It's awesome. It's a great show. If you haven't seen it, you should. But no character gets a happy ending, and that's the point. It's like Greek tragedy. It's awesome. The show, from start to finish, is so unapologetically bleak and itself. All of the harshness of the characterization of our main characters comes into sharp focus and then melts into the larger message of the show. That bleak portrayal of life in America is the point of the show, to shine a light on the aspects of life in America that those in power don't want to focus on, because then they'd have to admit on some level that the great American experiment has failed to some degree. Aspects of life in this country that I can attest to. This shit happens all the time. Many of my friends, the friends' family and community members started out life with lofty aspirations and dreams before being shown the boot and eaten alive by a system that wasn't designed to keep everyone at the top. While American Idiot doesn't have a specific call to action, it is a very honest portrayal of the criticism of this country. In doing that, the show serves as a point of understanding between the layperson that the government has seemingly forgotten about. It is representative of an underrepresented populace, and in that representation, the listener hopefully finds power, understanding, and a feeling that they have been seen and heard. The value in American Idiot's political message is that the message is being delivered. It is giving a voice to the voiceless, showing us that we are seen and heard, and there is power in that. Realizing you're not alone, like the people in charge would like you to feel you are, has a lot more power than people tend to realize. The hit TV show Shameless is also an expressly political piece of art. If you don't believe me, watch it again. Much like American Idiot, Shameless has no direct call to action, even though it lives in that sort of same vein as American Idiot when it comes to the commentary that it makes. Shameless is a TV show about generational trauma, being poor in the Midwest, specifically the South Side of Chicago, and the importance of community. Over its way too many seasons, we are shown these three core tenets of the show over and over again in their continually evolved forms. Each character in the main Gallagher family personifies a specific trauma response or mental illness that they have received in long lineage with the tumultuous Gallagher name, with each of them fighting for their lives every fucking day not to be like their parents or their parents' parents. Lip is an autistic genius with an addiction issue. He also tends towards emotional vacancy when it comes to his partners, often unintentionally using them for sex and material gain. His father was an addict, so is he. His father treated the women in his life like commodities, and after being shown that love doesn't necessarily work out for kids like him, he leans in this direction as well. Lip allowed himself to be defined first by his relationships, not buying into all the people telling him that he has to be the one to get away solely because he is smart. And when he is first devastated by Karen, the alcoholism and commitment issues begin until he does eventually go off to college and falls madly in love with his professor, who also comes to break his heart. This causes him to fall even further into alcoholism and become a spitting image of his father. Ian is bipolar like his mother. He spends a great deal of the story grappling with this, refusing help from his surrounding community who cared deeply about him. Eventually, he does get help, but relapses when the leader of his community, Fiona, betrays him in a pursuit of her own ambitions. Ian fully succumbs to the God complex, kidnaps a child with the purest of intentions, and blows up a van, getting the best scene in the show by far. He then spends a great deal of time suffering the consequences of his actions before rejoining that community and eventually marrying his soulmate. Carl is a sociopath, suffering constant abuse from his father throughout his early childhood, being shown intense anger and destruction throughout his house on numerous occasions, led him to have a warped sense of what proper emotional responses are meant to look like. He destroys things because that's what he associates with happiness. He hurts people because he believes that this is how you show love. Gets into drug dealing and gang affiliation because it is a surefire way to make money in the environment he has been given. It takes literally seeing a dead body that a dear friend of his killed to snap the fuck out of it. It takes a girl literally showing him, hey, maybe let's take all of that anger and put it into something useful instead of being an insufferable asshole all the time. And from there, that helps him start grasping what an actual healthy and meaningful relationship is. But even this is skewed constantly and shows his warped perception of emotions. Debbie is a goddamn narcissist, and I fucking hate her. And it's so sad, like, why I hate her, because you can see how she got to where she got, like, clearly more than any of the other characters in the show, because aside from Liam, she's the youngest of the Gallagher kids, and she cared about Frank the most. So when the final straw hit for her, it hit hard. I still cry at the scene where she beats Frank with a pillowcase filled with soap and then has a full-blown breakdown. Even after this, she still finds some of Frank's behavior useful. She begins seeing the business of Frank Gallagher. In this, she internalizes the deep-seated narcissism it takes to emotionally manipulate people in order to get what you want from them, and then proceeds to do this again and again and again and again. Finally, Fiona Gallagher has borderline personality disorder. Her entire life has been defined by caring for other people in lieu of herself, having to do this from an age far too early for it to not be damaging to her. In this, she only sees value in other people's perception of her. No real sense is able to be developed in the psyche of Fiona. When she dates people, she turns into a mirror of them and willfully destroys the relationships she has because on some subconscious level, she believes that she doesn't deserve them. Her pattern of self-destructive behavior is always pointed out but never questioned outside of Lip, who is the one figure constantly throughout the show that will confront her on her nonsense, often resulting in a fight, but ultimately making Fiona realize that she probably does need to clean her act up a little bit. Constantly throughout the show, there is this struggle between Gallagher-bred individualism and the power of community and their want to help each other. Gallaghers will fight with their community and each other because they have been led to believe that the only road is the lonesome one. It is in these moments that they are given pushback on this perspective that they often receive the most growth in their respective character arcs. Class struggle is very pervasive in the show as well, and these themes of individualism versus community are also interlocked with class struggle. Again, there's no direct call to action, but Shameless is undeniably political. Art that is political, it speaks to us, it forces us to think and allows us to face the parts of our lives and the world that might be more difficult to take at face value. It can raise awareness for these problems, allow the marginalized to be seen on a larger scale, and if the value of an art object can only truly be assessed in discussion of the art object, then political art is abundant with value because oftentimes it only serves to be talked about or to push forward a discussion that is not being had. I don't think that's wholly satisfying though, right? Like, art that isn't inherently political isn't devoid of value by any means. It's also worth discussion and it's also worth assessing the value of. However, you'd be kind of hard pressed to find art that is not political in some way. I like you though. You're lucky. I like you. So I've done the hard work of sourcing art that is not political for the purposes of today's discussion. Part 2, art that is for sure not political in any way whatsoever. Good morning, class. Visual continuity when it comes to the video essay format, I feel, is fucking stupid. Postseason baseball has started and a bitch is stressed. My team is not in the postseason because we kind of suck ass right now, but I care deeply about a couple of the other teams, and I really fucking hate a lot of the teams that are in it. So it's fun to root against them and root for the other guys. And I am stressed. We're on a field trip. If you can't tell today, class, we are in my living room instead of my studio. In a certain manner of speaking, I only exist inside of myself. Other people only see a facsimile of me that is based on what I outwardly present and how they respond to it. And I have no real control over the value judgment that they assign to that facsimile of me. Isn't that fucked up? Anyways, I bought a tapestry when I moved into this place, and I really like it. Stuff like this is, I feel, a very good and clear indicator of what we are talking about in this part. Non-political art, as this isn't really trying to convey anything. I did not buy this piece of art for the express intent of looking at it and assessing it under the banner of it being art in the same way I would assess like an album or a painting or a TV show or things like that. This is decoration specifically to fill the beige, blue, whatever the fuck color this is that every apartment complex and house seems to get painted with nowadays that I think is fucking ugly. I want to have tacky yellow walls in my kitchen, but if I do that, I lose the security deposit that I was already gonna lose in the first fucking place. Anyways, other forms of non-political art. I'm taking this off. It's like, I got the AC running and it's like nice in here, I guess, but it's also like hot, like, and that's like thick. Other types of artworks that I believe to be explicitly non-political are kind of things that fall into the same vein as the tapestry. Curtains that have specific little patterns on them, those are fun. That is definitely an art form that I would consider to be non-political. Paintings, what Rothko actually refers to as like mantle paintings. Certain forms of craftsmanship can also be viewed as non-political, like the creation of instruments. While it may not typically be viewed as a form of art, if you ask any, like a luthier that makes guitars for a living, if they consider what they do art, they would 100% say what they consider what they do as art, and that's not a inherently political thing that they're doing in the process of that. If we take that one a step further, woodworkers, wood carvers, people who make like dressers and doors and shit, they would definitely consider that to be an art form. I would also consider that to be an art form. It's a beautiful and tactful, finesse-filled craft that takes a lot of finer dexterity and like a lot of things that you would use to describe the process of creating a painting or a song go into these like elements of woodcrafting. But you definitely wouldn't have some dude and his also ostentatiously dressed friend sitting in a fucking Sears saying shit in front of her dresser like, I wonder what this specific carving on the dresser drawer says about the creator's views on Marxist philosophy. Is Sears even a thing anymore? Do people know what Sears are? What happened to the mall? What happened to third spaces? I miss the mall. Take me back to a simpler time. I sense I might have struck a nerve. This is probably not the answer that you were looking for when you came to me and asked me, hey, give me some examples of non-political art so I can show this video to all my artsy friends and be like, look, some transgender proved that all art isn't political. I didn't even write that. That just came to me. So, that's fine. I can adjust. We can figure something else out. I forgot to do it again. I forgot to do the video essay thing. For you today, as an example of non-political art, I am going to call into the classroom Joan Mitchell. I love Joan Mitchell's artwork. It is like genuinely some of the like most inspired and divine pieces of art that I have ever seen. And it like just the way that she paints and the way that she thinks about painting is like one of the most inspiring things to me in this world. And I desperately hope that the day comes where I will get to view her art in person, because that I think would in some manner change my brain chemistry. Joan Mitchell is a beloved painter of the abstract expressionist movement. She has described her craft as being a like completely sensory experience for her. When she paints a tree, she does not just paint the physical form of a tree. She paints the feel, the smell, the sound, everything that tree is what Mitchell paints. And she specifically does this from a process that she describes in an interview in this book, where she will take pictures in her mind of certain things as to give them a sort of immortality in a sense, so she cannot forget them. She does this, she admits it herself, because of an intense fear of death and loss. She says she hates goodbyes, and she is fearful that when people say goodbye, it will be the last time she ever sees them. She is afraid of being left behind in a certain sense. And so she takes pictures of things, and then she paints her memory of those things via that picture and creates some of the most astonishing artwork I have ever seen. It's the thing that gives her paintings this sort of dream-like, otherworldly quality. Joan got her start, or I should say Mitchell, I don't know her like that. Mitchell got her start painting at a very young age. She was apparently laid up in a hospital bed as a child and was able to look out the window of her hospital room and see nature. And in that moment, she realized that if she wanted to be there, she could paint it and bring it to her in a sense, even though she might not be able to go out there. A profound appreciation for the natural world was ingrained into Mitchell as a child, and it deeply affected her painting throughout her career. This is the way that Mitchell describes her work, as taking photographs of times and their places so they can, in a sense, be eternal as they were in a moment. She would also say, I don't paint pictures, I paint paintings, giving way to the abstractness of her work. However, that assessment in and of itself is incorrect, and any assessment of Mitchell's work that is like this, a contextless word vomit attempting to describe what is meant to be intuited, misses the point. Mitchell's body of work isn't amazing and stunning and a beautiful addition to the canon because of a bunch of descriptors and labels and well planned out uses of technique. It's amazing because it's amazing. It's amazing because the only way to experience Mitchell's work is by experiencing them, each individual painting. I have an art book of hers right there. And even in viewing this and the paintings within this art book, I feel like I'm not getting the entire fullness of experiencing a Mitchell painting. Her canvases were massive, so much so that people say that if you stood up next to them, you could be fully enveloped in a world of color and truly be able to experience a Joan Mitchell painting, which is what she wanted. But Joan was not a political person. She did not stand and fight for much like some of her contemporaries did during the post-World War II era and going into the Korean and Vietnam Wars. These things, while I'm sure she has opinions on them because by all accounts she was a very opinionated person, were not the focus of her work. The focus of her work was capturing the world around us in honest and awe-inspiring detail. Joan Mitchell was not political. She paints paintings. And that's fucking beautiful. Mark Rothko, you've heard of him. You definitely have an opinion on him. He's the guy that people cite most of the time when they see some bullshit that is just like a line on a canvas that gets sold for mega millions worth of dollars, and they're like, how the fuck did that get sold for mega millions worth of dollars? I could fucking do that. And then they go and try to do that, and it's a lot harder than they think it is, and they're like, oh fuck, that transgender on the internet proved me right. Needless to say, he's a fairly divisive human being. He also regularly gets brought up in the art politics debate. Clearly, an artist who makes pieces with such undeniable aura would support the non-political art argument. Fun thing about Rothko is that when it sits in a gallery or a storehouse or in like a private collection or something, it's just sitting there. It's aura farming there. That's what it wants. And eventually, when it gets enough power, it's going to self-actualize and start handing out to paintbrushes to children like Mark, their creator, would have wanted. This is DEI to me. Rothko had a long and varied career before getting into the stuff that we know him for today. He actually had a super interesting upbringing. He was a Jewish Russian that immigrated to the U.S. via Portland, Oregon, before moving to New York, and the whole reason he and his family immigrated to the U.S. was because people were doing an anti-Semitic again and trying to round up and kill Jewish people in Russia before the Germans did it during World War II with Hitler. Oh shit, I can't say Hitler on YouTube. I'm gonna have to censor that. Fuck. So anyways, Mark and his family, at the time, the Rothkoviches, get to Portland. Mark sees Portland, Oregon, goes, this is lame and gay and I don't like it, and he fucks off to New York to start an art career. He, over his time in New York, because he wasn't making a lot of money as an artist in the earlier stages of his career, did odd jobs and worked as like a server and things like that, while he devoted a frankly gross amount of time to his art. It's impressive, and it shows a true dedication to his craft, but Mans was like, I feel like if I would be able to ask him, like, hey dog, did you ever get sleep when you were on your hustle? He would say, no, what the fuck is sleep? Shut up. So anyways, Rothko's in New York, he's painting, he's very inspired by the surrealist and expressionist movement before him, and so he starts learning his craft and painting things in this way. He had his own bit of expressionist art that was the mass majority of the early stages of his career, and it was super interesting. My personal favorite of this period of time was the scene that he painted, that it was untitled, but it's commonly referred to as Subway. It's awesome. It makes me scared in the best way possible. It makes me want to scream cry. It's awesome. It wasn't until later on in his career that he would begin to develop his aesthetic framework as we know it for today, and what is most popular from his work. In the sort of interim between surrealist expressionist painting and abstract expressionist painting that he is well known for, he kind of had this like interesting segment in the middle where he was really into Greek mysticism, and he would paint the raw emotion of Greek mythological stories, and it's like some of the sickest shit I've ever seen. There were many moments while I was reading through this book, I'm not done with it yet, there were many moments while I've been reading through this book where I get to a painting and I just go, shut the fuck up, that's awesome. Like, the aura is off the charts, and it's like divine in a way that is difficult to describe, but when you see it, it's like, yes, this is it. This is what I would like. This is what people should be killing each other over. We shouldn't be killing each other. Don't do that. The argument, to get back to the point I'm making, for Rothko being a non-political artist, or at least his artwork being non-political, as Rothko over the course of his career was tentatively and then very politically active, kind of like on and off over the course of his career. It was kind of the vibe of like, my friends are going to the protest, and like I really care about my friends, and so I'm gonna care about this thing that they care about. And then like every once in a while something would happen, like the Rockefellers would piss someone off, and he'd be like, hey, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And it's kind of awesome. It didn't happen all that often. It was more kind of like the vibes friend based thing most of the time, but for the most part, those politics did not seep through into his paintings. So people use Rothko in the art politics debate, and it's a very effective argument. His entire ethos towards painting is to not give the viewing audience, the spectator, anything really to go off of. He wants them to intuit their emotional response to it and rely on their own critical thinking skills and emotional intelligence to give a value judgment and assessment of a piece of art. Again, the aura, off the charts. That's insane. I think in this pair of artists, Rothko and Mitchell, from the abstract expressionist movement, we can find a workable definition of non-political or apolitical art. Apolitical art is an art object that through no means of its own draws the spectator to a specific political ideology or event and does not impress its intent onto the spectator, instead letting the spectator levy their own intent, impression, and value from the art object and the spectator's relationship to it. Under this definition, we can find a wide array of things, including many expressionists and abstract expressionist artists. The entire suite of examples I gave before getting to Mitchell and Rothko, and a wide array of other things. Under this definition, advertising art would be political, as it is impressing its intent to get you to make a purchase onto the spectator. Architecture could also be, and under this definition, considered apolitical, as it serves a specific function, yes, but it does not actively draw the spectator to an ideology or impress intent onto them. Some architecture may be representative of a political ideology, but that tends to come after the fact outside of a few specific instances. Under this definition for apolitical art, we can also draw a definition for political art. Political art is an art object that draws the spectator to a specific political ideology or event and impresses a specific view of those ideologies onto the spectator, or calls these ideologies and events into sharp focus. Does that work for everyone? No, of course it doesn't. Put your fucking hands down. It's not question and answer time, it's lecture time. Sit the fuck down and listen. I could probably turn the light in here on to be better, but I don't like that light. I don't like how it looks at me. I don't like the way most lights look at me, because I prefer soft lighting, and most lighting is not soft lighting, or it is not the correct soft lighting, and it's never the correct amount. We'll be getting visits from the cats and possibly the dog as we are back in the classroom, but we are still in my house. Part 3, context is important. What I find super interesting about this question is that there are very solid arguments to be made on both sides. There are also very notable detractions made on both sides of the argument, certain things that either consciously or unconsciously get left out for the sake of making the argument. It is also a deeply personal question, and in answering it, it tends to reveal a lot about the person answering the question in the way that they choose to answer it, surrounding their worldview. For example, as a part of the research that I did for this, I came across a video by Art vs. Machine on the topic. I found myself agreeing with a lot of the points that made in the video, but not agreeing with the way that the points were being verbalized. The overall tone of the video was this sort of like holier than thou, and like almost speaking down onto an audience that would view all art as being political. I haven't used Uber Eats in months. I don't understand. Sidestepping the very real assertion that the climate in which an art object or art movement was made in is important to the larger context of the piece itself, by saying we are broadening the definition of politics to an extent where it becomes meaningless just to fit into the progressive narrative that all art is political. Again, I think there is a valid point here. Saying that all art is political does mean that the word political is going to have to do some heavy lifting to encompass all of art. However, it doesn't consider the fact that art is made with intent by an artist living in a specific culture that is actively being defined by the politics of the time. I feel a need to clarify. When we are talking about art, we are talking about Rothko, Mitchell, Van Gogh, Brecht, Kermit the Frog, and fucking Happy Little Tree Guy. We are not talking about Timmy the toddler, Sarah the 4-year-old, and Zen the based 2-year-old using neo-pronouns, making stick figure drawings of their parents. All art is valid, and you do have to start somewhere, but I feel it is a cop-out answer to look at the art of a child and wax fucking poetic in a highbrow, holier-than-thou way about, yes, all art is clearly political,
political. Look at this blob of shit that Sarah did on printer paper with marker while she was supposed to be paying attention in class because she hasn't been given an ADHD diagnosis yet. Like, shut the fuck up. That is not a good faith argument. It is a cop-out, and I won't have it in my classroom. Either form an actual opinion or leave. The door's over there. You'd have to leave that way. I know what you're thinking. Miss Izzy, you didn't take into consideration gray area objects in your definitions from earlier. Furthermore, are you going to define what political even means for the purposes of our discussion? And to that, I'd say very astute observation, student. Good job. Gold star. I didn't have a better place in the script for those things, so I'm putting them here right now. Art objects that fall into gray areas under our working definitions of political and apolitical art, we should take a wider look at them to gain a fuller understanding of the piece we are talking about. We can gain a fuller understanding of any given piece of art by taking into consideration the larger cultural context that a piece was created in. It would also behoove us to use this framework of analysis when assessing pieces that we have already covered, because we might learn something, and that's what we're here to do. And for our working definition of politics, before we get lost in the sauce on this analysis framework that we're about to dive into, I believe that we should define politics as such: a event or action by the governing body of a specific nation or state that directly affects the lives and culture of the nation or state. Does that work for you? Of course it doesn't. Shut up. Put your hands down. Let's exercise our critical thinking skills for a moment and use Rothko and the abstract expressionist movement as an example of assessing something under this framework. I do feel personally that Rothko specifically falls more into the gray area, as in his personal life, as I talked about earlier, he was an outspoken activist and formed numerous artist coalitions during his time in New York. The abstract expressionist movement is cited by many people when they claim that all art cannot be political. See me earlier in this video. Because, like, look at any given abstract expressionist piece of art. It sure doesn't fucking look political. Coming into popularity at the start of the 20th century, primarily in Germany, and continuing its popularity throughout the First and Second Civil War, Expressionism is a movement created in a culture of harsh division and rising oppressive governing bodies. The way in which expressionist paintings and other art objects of the time, such as Bertolt Brecht's entire philosophy towards the theater, are purposefully not telling a cohesive story or giving much to the viewer in the form of intuitive meaning. Instead, leaving the onus on the spectator to rely on their own emotional response to understand the piece. I imagine Brecht really fucked with expressionist painters. Same kind of energy. A great sense of individualism is a defining feature of expressionist paintings. Intense individualism is expressly against the rising dominant political ideologies of the time. Fascism, nationalism, the weird form of communist that the Soviet Union was doing, these are all political ideologies that thrive when the populace is one cohesive unit working under a singular set of ideals. Expressionism and fascism are diametrically opposed in this sense, with abstract expressionism coming directly after the Second World War in the United States, being directly inspired by the German expressionist movement. Got like one hair in my eye and it's pissing me off, but I can't rub it, otherwise I'll fuck up my eyeliner. Abstract expressionism is an evolved form of these ideas. Abstract expressionism and fascism are also diametrically opposed. Even if no one came together and said, hey gang, let's form a artistic movement based on hyper-individualist ideology as a means of saying fuck you to whatever the fuck it is that Germany is doing, it is still noteworthy that just before World War I and in the years in between the First and Second World War, we got Expressionism, and then in the aftermath of World War II, we got Abstract Expressionism. Culturally, these art movements are linked to the political state of the world at the time. So even though you can look at a Rothko painting and see that there is no inherent story being told or direct meaning to be inferred just at a cursory glance, once you understand the history of the movement and the cultural context it was created in, it is hard to deny that it isn't political in some way. His earlier work was defined by the alienation he felt as a Russian Jewish immigrant during a time that Jewish people were being persecuted in Russia, and then again alienated in the United States because he was Jewish. And his later work being an in-depth expression of alienating features meant to force the spectator to look into themselves for the value and intent of a piece. However, is it political, or is it just an expression of the culture? Was Rothko what the culture was feeling? Does Rothko have an agenda? Can you draw a line culturally from Rothko to Kendrick Lamar? Could you call Rothko and the abstract expressionist movement democratic propaganda? Is Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance a form of democratic propaganda? Perhaps, but that's not what we're talking about today. Back to Rothko, I don't think you can call this movement propaganda because of the inherent properties of the movement. The greats of the abstract expressionist movement were largely not political leaders. Their politics, even in light of major world events, were also unpopular. They just created art that was either consciously or subconsciously a response to the times they were living in. And this is what we got. Art that deliberately goes out of its way to not give much to the viewer and forces them to rely on their own emotional and critical thinking skills to intuit meaning of the work. Hyper-individualism is at the core of this movement, and that is something that fascists hate. So much so that Hitler and the Nazi Party made a gallery of expressionist paintings specifically to belittle it and make fun of it. And you don't do that to something that you're not afraid of. It's insane to me that that's real. That he just gathered up a bunch of fucking expressionist paintings from Germany at the time in a gallery to just walk through and be like, this is stupid, right, guys? And all of his fucking yes men around him were like, yes, sir, yes, Mr. Hitler. In this sense, our friend Art versus Machine is correct. Stretching the meaning of the word political is reductive to the movement, even though the movement itself is a response to the dominant culture and politics of the time. Rothko did not make this art with the express intent of it being a statement against fascism. That is just the context surrounding the movement. Let's break this down even further. This is the part where I get very personal as I am comfortable being on the internet. I made a painting called Vibraphone. I don't know why I called it that. That's just what God ordained, and I have yet to uncover its meaning. Vibraphone is album art for a music project that I did under the same name. It is an acrylic painting that I did based off of a picture that I took of my patio here at my house. On the surface, Vibraphone doesn't look political at all. However, just a broad description of what the piece is and what it was attached to doesn't describe the context that it was created in. The context in which it was created in was that of dubious financial strain that I was going through, and for the most part still am going through, because of the economy and because of the state of the world and because of what the Trump administration has done to this country. It was made during a time when I wasn't fully sure if I was going to be able to get to stay in this house that I have been living in for a couple of years now, and I'm quite fond of. It's the first house that I've ever taken the time to decorate fully as my own adult, and it means a lot to me, damages and all. But this is the first place that I have ever taken the time to properly care for as if it were my own, and I was very fearful for a period of time that I was going to lose it. I'm no longer fearful of this, thank God. That doesn't change the fact that I was, and it was a very real possibility that I was going to be evicted from this home. Of which I do consider it to be a home and not just a house. I've had many deep and personal moments here with myself and my pets and my loved ones. I'm actually getting kind of emotional. I've lived a lot of my life in this house, and it means a lot to me. And so the idea of losing it and having to go somewhere else and start over was very scary. And so one would be able to take that, assess that vibraphone is political. It is a painting in which, if I were to get kicked out, be able to remember this period of my life by. Subconsciously, I was possibly wanting to capture the beauty of this place in case I did lose it. The socio-political circumstances that led to me being in this situation are an important factor surrounding its creation, in spite of the fact that my intent was not to express that anxiety in the piece. Vibraphone and the subsequent body of music it is attached to is, in this sense, political, as it was a subconscious response to the politics and culture of the time that it was created in. Alternatively, vibraphone is not political whatsoever. I didn't create it with the express intent of it being viewed as a political piece of art. I didn't create it with the express intent, consciously, of it being a reminder of a place that I might lose. I created it for album art. Its express purpose as an artwork is to get across the larger aesthetic language that I am communicating over the body of music and to tie it all in a neat little bow. I took a photo of the state of my patio and its kind of like rainy overgrowth at the time because I liked how it looked and I thought it made a good album cover. Real Birdie by Slaughter Beach Dog vibes. Great album, by the way. Listen to it if you haven't. I like all of my album art to have the visual cohesion of being something that I drew or painted, and if it's a bigger project like an album rather than an EP or a single, I will go all the way to paint it and painstakingly think out of what the background to the painting should be, because that is something that I also very much enjoy doing in my paintings in general, is figuring out how to display them in the best way possible to elevate the text of the painting. So in this specific instance with vibraphone, I felt it spoke to the larger aesthetic framing of the album if I put it up in the window in my kitchen where I have a bunch of little tchotchkes and small figures and decorations, because it fit into the larger Midwest emo aesthetic that I tend to work under, as it is an aesthetic and a body of music that I greatly appreciate. And with that, there are some rules to follow under that specific aesthetic framework. The Midwest emo aesthetic is known for its vague and sometimes grainy pictures of banal architecture and pieces of infrastructure that don't give a lot, but what it lies inherent within them is this deep appreciation for the mundane that a lot of the lyrics of the music is attempting to get across, because admittedly not a lot going on out here in the Midwest. It is not political because I wasn't responding to the circumstances I was in. I was doing it based on an aesthetic framework to serve the purpose of the larger piece of art that the painting was going to be a part of. Both of these respective readings are true and valid because both of them influence the art in a meaningful way. The socio-political context was just less prominent compared to the cultural aesthetic context. On top of this, I did not set out to make a political piece of art when I made the painting and subsequent album art. This is something I rarely do because the politics of my art are meant to be largely subtextual. I make expressionist music in this sense, where my intent is always trying to get across a specific feeling or a vibe rather than a specific message as a whole. These cultural, political, and aesthetic context of my music plays a large role because of this, but it is never the main focus. So while I am not a political artist, politics do exist within my art. Rothko would kind of hit different if World War II never happened, or if he never had to immigrate from Russia. Rothko is not political, but politics do exist within his art. Part 4. Your cousin's shitty stick figure drawing of their parents is absolutely political. It is, and I'm gonna prove it. Knowing what we know now about the importance of the historical, cultural, and political context surrounding art and art movements, we can properly disseminate how all art is political. I believe if you want to fully appreciate a specific art object and assess its proper value through conversation, it would behoove you to know the cultural and historical context surrounding the art object, the artist, and the history of whatever movement they are a part of. Fundamentally, the level of discussion that you are capable of having is less or more depending on how much you know about the culture and history surrounding that art object. When you see a comic from an artist on Instagram that you have never seen before, the value and assessment and meaning that you are going to get from it is by and large different than if it is a artist on Instagram that you follow and have seen many different examples of their art, and so you have a greater understanding of their cultural, historical, and aesthetic framework. Take the newest Superman movie, for example. Favorite boy of the channel, Ben Shapiro, did a review of the new Superman movie, and it, by God, is interesting. First of all, Ben Shapiro's viewing of this piece is wild, and it is fundamentally less complete than someone like NerdSync's review on the movie. Using this example, we can see the importance of knowing the historical, cultural, and political context of an artwork before discussing it. Shapiro's review of the Superman movie is laden with falsities surrounding the lore and history of the Superman character, which is what he predicates his whole review on. The idea that the depiction of the character Superman is not historically accurate and is being corrupted by the woke, this is false in numerous ways on numerous occasions throughout Shapiro's review, which leads to a core misunderstanding of the movie. It is this about Shapiro's review that NerdSync works to show in their respective video on the piece. Because of their deep, fully formed, and well-researched level of knowledge on Superman and his history, NerdSync comes off as markedly more competent compared to Shapiro on the topic, has an easier time talking about the piece and forming meaningful opinions on the piece, and is very effective in showing why Shapiro's assessment of the piece is incorrect and incomplete. Same goes for Rothko. Understanding his history as an artist gives way to a more full assessment of his work as a whole, specifically in how it changed over time to become what it eventually did. You can still appreciate Rothko without this, sure. You are missing something that makes his body of work all the more meaningful and important in art history. Rothko had an impact for a reason. So, if we want to fully assess the value and meaning and intent of an art object, we need to take into consideration the cultural historical context that the piece was made in. In not understanding these aspects of the piece, we are missing an important and fundamental piece of the art object. Under this framework, one cannot separate the cultural miasmas of the time that an object was created in from the object itself without losing something in discussion, which is where we derive the most value from art objects. The political happenings of the times in some manner shape the culture that we live in. Like right now, the political state of the US is this intense divide between far-right the nationalists attempting to form an ethno-state and status quo Democrats that are trying to get us back to where we were 60 plus years ago. And then so many people caught in the middle of this, not understanding really what the fuck is happening or the culture and historical significance of all of the events that are happening right now. This has been in the works for 60 years. In American culture, because of this intense divide, there is a lot of chaos. There is a lot of violence. There is a lot of people not really understanding why things are the way they are, but also not having the time to sit down and figure it all out or have it explained to them, because it really is a lot to understand, and it's something you'd have to like take a class on to really grasp the fullness of, and we just don't have time for that in culture anymore. We're all too busy in the fucking hustle trying to make sure we can put food on the table and pay our bills. We don't have time for all of this shit. And that's kind of by design. If we don't have time to learn about the system that we live inside of, it's a lot easier to control the populace. And if we don't have access to proper education on our governing bodies when we are in school, we're also a lot easier to control. It makes a lot of sense why they're systematically defunding education programs across the country. A dumber population is an easier to control population. This intense sense of chaos can even be seen in the art that is popular right now. Currently, there does not seem to be any major artistic movement that is taking over the landscape. Largely, it's being referred to as contemporary art because it is contemporary times, but there is no specific aesthetic framework that a large majority of artists are working under. There are many different aesthetic frameworks that all of these different artists are working under that culminate into the culture that we have now. There's no cohesive through line. People are pulling from bygone aesthetics and movements to ingratiate them into their own work. People are coming up with new and wild ways of creating and manifesting art into the world. It's kind of beautiful in a sense, but it's very reflective of the chaos that we live in. That our art is just as chaotic. It is a reflection of the culture, which is a reflection of the politics. The same thing happens in movements of bygone eras. The abstract expressionist movement. I'll talk about it till I'm dead. Can you tell that I enjoy it? I made this one. A world divided, heading steadily towards hyper-nationalist fascist ideologies in the middle of a war, birthed a need for an individualist approach to the world. And so we got the hyper-individualist aesthetic framework of expressionism and abstract expressionism. The art was created because of the culture, because of the politics. Even in my bullshit examples of non-political art, we can see this same effect happen under the framing that we have created for analysis. What's the purpose of having a tapestry or a mantle painting or curtains that have a specific pattern on them? It communicates your involvement and commitment to specific aesthetic and cultural subgenres within society. My tapestry from earlier signals to people who come into my house and the larger vibe of the decorations in here that I am a part of the hippie, indie, grunge aesthetic subculture, and those subcultures are inherently political. No subculture is apolitical because they are all created from the culture they reside in, which is created from the politics that it resides in. So, how is your little cousin's stick figure drawing of their parents' political. It is a specific reflection of how the child views their parents because of the cultural and political happenings of the time. Is mommy and daddy big and strong and powerful because they haven't been hit nearly as hard by the economic crisis that we are walking into? Or are mommy and daddy sad and stressed out because dad lost his job at the factory because everything is slowly being replaced by machines that will always be 100% more efficient than human beings are able to, and daddy's never really been that good with computers, and the company didn't really want to spend time training him on how to run the maintenance for the computers, and it's just going to be cheaper to hire someone new anyways. So daddy lost his job, and now mommy and daddy are stressed out all the time. Their view of their parents is shaped by the culture that they live in, which is shaped by the politics of the time. The way the parents raise the kid is shaped by the culture that they live in and the politics of the time. The stick figure drawing is an indirect expression of this cultural political phenomenon because the politics shape the parents, which shapes the kid's view of the parents. Art is inseparable from the cultural and societal happenings of the times. Culture is inseparable from the politics of the time. All art is political. Well adjusted and on top of things, is any 20-something who is our age could be, cause you and me, we are one and the same. Modern abolition bombers, what do you say? Wow, I'm really not beating the wolf cut allegations today. People think I'm a lot younger than I am, and sometimes I see myself at certain angles, and I really do believe it. I'm 24. People oftentimes think that I'm like 21 or 22. It's kind of crazy. I'm really not beating the wolf cut allegations today. I look really good right now. Thank you a lot for watching and paying attention to me as I ramble incoherently about art, philosophy, and politics. It's a lot of fun for me. I really enjoy writing these things and putting them all together. And next, on our syllabus for the class, I'm probably going to be talking about American Idiot on Broadway. I don't know how big of a video that is going to be, but it is going to... It's probably going to be pretty easy to write because I already kind of know what I want to say about it because I've been wanting to write something about American Idiot on Broadway for a really long time. So that look out for that at some point. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and look at my eyeliner. I did fun little thing. It's not winged. You can see that it's not winged because I don't know how to do that.